You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. Thank you for joining us again this week and welcome to the show. So I just got to ask you guys a question. Like, hey, did anybody, want to ask, does anybody else like the president? Do you like the president, but like the president? Anyone else like to dry hump flags, American flags? I mean, what the hell is that? Seriously, this new thing that he has begun to do where he just kind of assaults and gropes and grabs him by the flaggy. I don't really know, but like that kicked off a bit of crazy American Christianity, especially in terms of CPAC. Oh my gosh. And so we are going to be talking this hour today on this show about some of the craziness within Christian. Well, actually, we talk about that every week, but more specifically, the craziness of Christianity in politics regarding this little thing called Project Blitz. We'll get more to that later. But as I've begun to talk about the craziness of our flag humping president, that should lead you right into what we like to talk about at the beginning of every show. It's the Christian Crazy of the Week. And if you've ever seen a man grope a flag, it doesn't get crazier than that, especially with this big orange stupid grin on his face. I think he closes his eyes and just wishes it was Melania or somebody spanking him with a Forbes magazine on his big ass tushy. So yes, I'm sorry, where did I go there? Oh, I spiraled. Christian Crazy time. That's right, here we go.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He know what I want.
So speaking of Christians and crazy and CPAC, who doesn't want a rousing speech from the dude that founded the company MyPillow.com? Oh yeah. That dude was there because I guess it's a who's who of all these weirdos and freaks that say great things about our president, especially invoking God in the process. Don't believe me? Listen to Mr. MyPillow himself, Mike Lindell.
Now we go back in time to 2016, and I see myself in divine appointments, and one was especially important. Donald Trump invited me to meet him at Trump Tower in New York City. I walked into his office with high hopes on August 15, 2016. I walked out of that office after meeting with him, and I knew God had chosen him for such a time as this.
FYI, such a time as this is like a Christian trigger word, and it makes them all very horny. I mean, spiritually horny.
God answered our prayers, our millions of prayers, and gave us grace, and a miracle happened on November 8, 2016. We were given a second chance and time granted to get our country back on track with our conservative values and getting people saved in Jesus' name. As I stand before you today, I see the greatest president in history. Of course he is. He was chosen by God.
See, this is why we have the Christian Crazy every week, is to be able to pick apart the fact that Christianity in many ways has become a superstitious religion that really has little to do with Jesus anymore, like the teachings of Jesus about loving people and doing good in the world. We'd rather talk about divine appointments, or I don't know, whatever the hell it is. You don't believe me? If you don't believe me, this is crazy. Don't believe me, this is crazy, that Christianity is off the rails and has nothing to do with Jesus anymore, then we need to go ahead and listen to Rick Wiles. Rick Wiles is also someone who's a TV and radio host that is so far gone, I'm not even going to describe it. I'll just let you listen. To what's going on. Yep.
We're in a communist revolution.
Yes.
If these people are not put down, I'm talking about this revolution.
Yes.
If they are not put down, if this revolution is not crushed, you will be crushed. Their next step is a concentration camp for you. This is about our survival now, not just True News, your survival. It's our survival as a nation. The survival for your children and your grandchildren, because if we do not stop this communist revolution, this country's over as we have known it. There's no going back. The resistance that we're seeing right now is about the left is furious that the conservatives have put a brake on the communist revolution. And they intend to crush the conservatives. That's what it's all about. You need, if you don't know history, you need to study what has happened in countries where the communists have taken over. Because once they reach a certain level, there is mass bloodshed. And that's where the left is going in this country. They will tear this country to pieces. And when they do it, other nations are going to step in. I could see the United Nations someday passing a resolution asking China and Russia and other nations to send peacekeeping forces into American cities to put down the civil unrest.
Yes.
You think it's impossible? I don't. You let this continue and the world sees major cities burning, rioting, civil war in this country, Europe, Russia, China will send troops to America to patrol the streets. We'll lose this country. That's how close we are.
So, of course, yes, if we don't listen and follow Trump, and we do this. I do this week after week to be able to show you the hypocrisy that goes on the right, especially the Christian right, that about how loony and crazy it is, and how much, especially with folks like this, folks like Franklin Graham, folks like Jerry Falwell Jr., do all of these mental gymnastics to be able to continue to say that this, like, that all this that is happening is ordained by God, that everything that Trump is doing is ordained by God. And that's, you know, for people that have like rational minds and know how to think and, you know, do things with their brain, watch this and we're like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What in the world are you talking about? Because in many ways, Christianity has become such a superstitious religion. Now, is it meant to be? No. But especially as you move further to the right, it is all about superstition. It is all about fear. It is all about fear-mongering, and it is all about control. And folks like Rick Wiles, folks like that we have on here, like Jim Baker and all of them, it's fun. It's fun to be able to make fun of them and about how just absolutely crazy they are. But the sad fact of it is there's people that listen to them. There's people that follow them. There's people that, I mean, if you think about this, let's logically think about this. For you know, big dollar shows like this one, like Snarky Faith, they cost thousands of dollars a week. Oh, wait, no. What do they do? Oh, yeah, we make no money off this show. There's zero production budget, zero anything. Yeah. So we don't make any money off this, but we do this because I personally just believe in the message of Jesus and also believe very strongly against just the insanity that has become Christianity. But when you look at folks like Rick Wiles, if you look at folks like Jim Baker or Pat Robertson, and a lot of these people that hold a lot of sway, especially within the far right and especially within conservative Christianity, those folks, they do what they do because they have followers that give them money, that continue to fund what they do. And this is one of those signs to where you are just playing to your base, because Christianity in so many ways has become an industry. It's a business. It's a money-making enterprise. And the hokier or crazier that you get, the more it's like Infowars. The more dollars roll in because they are spiritually manipulating people. And shows like what we do here and other ones like this that are out there in the world are hopefully trying in a small way to be able to say that is not Christianity. This fear-mongering is not Christianity. Donald Trump was not appointed by God. Donald Trump was a man that was not elected by the majority, but was put in because of gerrymandering and the Electoral College. That's why Donald Trump is in there. Donald Trump was in there because of a lot of racist, bigoted misogynists finally found their hero, a man that spoke like them. Don't blame God on this. Blame yourselves on this, America, this for why we have Trump. Your Bible signing president. Because that's a thing now. And we're going to spend the time this hour talking through, like we do many hours on this show week after week, talking about how Christianity has been taken over by a bunch of crazy people, a bunch of like dictator wannabes. I mean, you think Trump is bad. Look at all these leaders of these different little tribes within Christianity. They're crazy as hell. And they want power just like Trump does. And they have followers just like Trump does. And that's why we talk about crazy stuff here in the Christian Crazy at the top of the hour when we do this. And there was plenty more that I could have done this week, but I want to at least not just make fun of it, but really hammer home why we do these things. So all of that crazy brings us to our main story that we want to kind of sit and camp at and talk about in various ways. And that is Project Blitz. Now, I do remember in the back of my head, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I think we talked about this briefly a while back on the show. And if you don't know what Project Blitz is, it is a state-based campaign against equality and freedom of religion. You want to know exactly what they are in their own words? Because you can go ahead and find this on the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation page. They even have a section for Project Blitz. So I'm first going to go ahead and just kind of lay this out in their terms, and then I'll translate it to what it actually means. So on the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation website, Project Blitz, they lay it out like this. The purpose is to protect the free exercise of traditional Judeo-Christian religious values and beliefs in the public square, and to reclaim and properly define the narrative which supports such beliefs. Their mission? To provide research, information, and analysis to support lawmakers who may be enacting specific legislation to fully protect religious liberty and the free exercise of our faith in the public square by eliminating the paths for legal retribution or government interference, and to see the public discourse related thereto, understand and defend on our terms. Now, again, there's, and this is where we're going to run into some issues too as we talk through this, because there's a lot of language that they lay out here that sounds like all right. Like there's parts of it that sound all right. But there's also like red flags, bing, 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 as you're reading through this, because they continue to do this. Like at the beginning, traditional, they want freedom to exercise religion, but that religion being Judeo-Christian religious values, okay? And then as they begin to talk about this religious freedom and their mission, they continue to say our terms, our freedoms, our beliefs. So again, this isn't like a religious liberty group where we're trying to say, hey, everyone has the right to worship and pray in the way that they believe to do that. No. There's very specific and narrow. Part of their mission also is to encourage numerous key conservative legislators at the local, state, and federal level who are submitting legislation and public policy positions, while building a broad coalition of citizens supporting them with public relations, messaging, and grassroots activists on multiple fronts. And lastly, to reclaim and properly frame the narrative and language of religious liberty issues. Okay, so again, that is them. That is what this is in their terms. Okay, I'm going to give you a flip side And so we'll begin to kind of just talk through different ways people talk about this. And so this comes from blitzwatch.org. So this is also a group that is watching Project Blitz. And as you'll notice from their own wording, are quite skeptical and afraid of it. So the way they describe this as, Project Blitz is a concerted campaign by the Christian nationalist movement to implement radical anti-equality state policies and to attack lawmakers who oppose them. It uses a distorted idea of religious freedom to influence legislation one state law at a time and to undermine religious equality, attack the LGBTQ discrimination projections, and to reduce access to reproductive health care. So again, if we want to talk and just unpack that coded language, essentially saying this group is seeking to allow for discrimination and attack the LGBTQ part of our population, the brothers and sisters that are in our population here, to reduce access to reproductive health care centers. So that would be anti-Planned Parenthood, options for abortion, and reproductive rights as well too. So as you begin to kind of just see where the dance is going between the way these two groups are being able to talk about this and talk about what Project Blitz is, you begin to see really kind of what it is. And it's a movement that seeks more on the grassroots levels to be able to influence state by state the legislation and rules and laws that are in these states. Now, I bring all this up because a lot of the information that we have here, and I'm going to do this, we'll kind of do this in two parts. First, we're going to really kind of talk about like what are the aims, what are the goals, and what are they trying to do, and then we're going to launch into a little bit more about what are they doing and what have they done, because there's been new stuff that's been going on on the state level in Florida, where Project Blitz is getting traction and, for lack of a better term, making a difference, making headway. Yeah. And if you hadn't been able to tell from my tone in reading this stuff is bad. And if we didn't have the SEC rules, well, screw it. I'm going to go ahead and say it. This is bad. And last year, Project Blitz was behind state bills that were all about getting In God We Trust on school displays. There was these In God We Trust school display laws that were pushed through in, let's see, what am I seeing here? 5 states. There was also bills which allow religious discrimination in foster care and adoptions, which also passed in 3 states. So instead of this just kind of being this ominous boogeyman, like that may happen, this conservative wet dream. No. This wet dream has gotten sticky, and it's gotten a lot more solidified as it continues to move forward. So how does this work? How does this happen? I'm going to go ahead and read from this document, too, from the Blitzwatch group here that kind of outlines why a lot of this is dangerous, because they do it fairly succinctly. Okay. So the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation, which is a major supporter of Project Blitz, has published a 148-page policy manual that includes templates for 21 legislative bills. Last year, over 70 bills were introduced in state legislatures around the country, with even more expected this year. Unfortunately, some lawmakers who have supported these bills are unaware of the true nature and motivations of Project Blitz. The manual advises that advocates start with measures that Project Blitz considers relatively easy to pass and then builds momentum by proposing more dangerous bills that offer very broad exemptions for allowing religious-based discrimination. Project Blitz encourages the growth and spread of prayer caucuses in state legislators to advocate these bills, and in succeeding, about 33 states have now established prayer caucuses in their legislatures. The campaign also encourages faith baiting, seeking to brand opponents of these bills as being against freedom of religion. The proposed legislation falls under 3 main categories. So the first category that they are going after here are this: legislation regarding our country's religious heritage, which includes bills such as the mandatory display of In God We Trust in school classrooms, as well as bills that mandate Bible instruction in public schools. According to the guide, these measures do not garner much organized outside opposition. And even if a bill doesn't pass, it can still provide the basis to shore up later support for other government entities to support religious displays. There's a second category that they're going after. Resolutions and proclamations recognizing the importance of religious history and freedom. And this includes measures like recognizing the importance of biblical history and recognizing Christian Heritage Week in order to promote false narratives of the U.S. being founded as a Christian nation. The guide warns that while these measures will be criticized as favoring Christianity, such opposition does not play well amongst members of the general public, and making opponents take a recorded vote against them is a win in and of itself. For such measures, a vote is a win, regardless whether the bill passes. In Category 3 that they are going after are religious liberty protection legislation, including the most hotly contested measures, such as the resolution establishing public policy favoring adoption by intact heterosexual marriage-based families, and the, quote, Child Protection Act, which allows publicly funded adoption and foster care placement agencies to discriminate against same-sex couples, and the, quote, Teacher Protection Act, which unconstitutionally allows teachers and school administrators to proselytize to students. The guide says such legislation should not be proposed unless it can win, and that success is more likely with measured, narrowly crafted focus on small business owners, government employees, healthcare providers, pastors, adoptions agencies, and so on. And so what we're being able to see here is, on the surface, I mean, this is what begins to get me about this, is they begin to say, oh, we're really just wanting to establish prayer caucuses at different state legislatures, and to be able to say, oh, I mean, if you hear about this, oh, we want to establish a prayer caucus where we can pray and we can talk about, I don't know, whatever the hell God wants us to do in this legislature right here. I don't know. But it sounds innocuous. It sounds innocuous just when you begin to hear this. But you begin to also see that this is coded wording. When we hear that these are prayer caucuses, these are not prayer caucuses. Prayer is not the focus of this. There is a defined agenda behind this. And we've already begun to see issues with this happening, especially in states like Florida. And getting In God We Trust into the schools is just the gateway drug for Project Blitz. And okay, I'm going to give you some numbers of what happened just last year following the Project Blitz model. And this comes from au.org. And one of their, which is Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, they have an article uncovering Project Blitz. And from their counting of what happened last year, let's go ahead and look at this. And I think you're going to begin to say, wait, really? This is all going on in my state? Maybe in my state. So these are the different bills that follow the model of Project Blitz. And then I'm going to tell you how many states introduce similar bills that follow that model. So first, we have the bill to require or allow posting of the national motto, In God We Trust, into public schools or buildings. This was introduced in 26 different states. The bill to require or allow public schools courses on the Bible, 8 states. Resolutions establishing public policy that marriage should only be between one man and one woman, 2 states. The First Amendment Defense Act, which is called a Marriage Tolerance Act, again, very similar to the one that marriage is a man, only between a man and a woman, 7 states. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act, called the Preserving Religious Freedom Act, that's also 8 states. Bills to allow taxpayer-funded adoption and foster care agencies to use religion to justify denying children homes. 4 states. Bills that allow religious organizations to refuse to perform marriage ceremonies that do not comply with their religious beliefs. 6 states. Bills required posting of student prayer guidance. 1 state. Bills to expand students and teacher religious expression in public schools. 12 states. So over the last year, they were able to push through. Now, I'm not saying all of these were voted in, but it's a process that we're beginning to see. This is ramping up and it's moving forward. There were, 74 bills that are in the mold and model of Project Blitz that are following that playbook that were introduced across the country last year. Now, on some level, you may begin to say, like, hey, what does this matter? People, there's lots of groups with lots of agendas that are trying to push bills forward into this. Well, the problem with this is we are also living in a country right now where, as you hear all the time here on the Christian Crazy, we begin to see this where the lines between if there ever was, between church and state, they are gone, brother. And during the Trump administration, we've seen this rise of Christian nationalism, this belief that somehow we need to flood government with our religious beliefs, flood government with our religious ideology, which is just a horrible, insane mistake within all of this. Now, I'm mentioning all of this, and I am, and maybe I'm beating a dead horse this hour in bringing this to light. But this is a problem that is not going to go away. This is a problem that what we began to see, and I think in many ways there's a lot of folks out there that will begin to say, oh, this obsession with Christianity and politics, and it was, and I've said this before on the show, that like this is like the Trump getting elected was like the apex. It was like the peak of all of this coming together, like the years of the religious right trying to move forward and infiltrate government and push their own agenda through the government onto the people. We've kind of seen this hit the peak of, it's kind of, Jerry Falwell Sr.'s like dead wet dream that's come to fruition finally. And the scary part behind this is simply this. What began to seem we've done shows on this. I've done interviews with people about this. I've done research about this. And initially there was a thought process that the white evangelical voters out there that overwhelmingly got behind Trump, that it was for a variety of reasons. In the past, it was they felt like disconnected from larger culture, and Trump kind of spoke to their pain. But more and more, as we kind of see stuff beginning to move forward, as we begin to see Trump get more and more ridiculous and audacious, as we begin to see just how, in many ways, how Congress is getting more ridiculous and outrageous, what we begin to see here is that it was less about Trump's supporters and those that continue to support him. It was less about them feeling angry and disconnected. It's at least for how I'm seeing this, it's begun to seem more and more that Trump gave them a license to be angry. He gave them a license to hate and to be bigoted and to be racist and to be misogynist. And this man that was out there saying the stuff that they were believing in their minds, but knew that it was political suicide to be able to say these things, these intolerant and horrible and evil things. Trump began to give them a free pass. And even as we see how we continue to cover the news and cover Trump, I mean, it's one audacious either screw up or story after another. It's him, Trump continuing to back the authoritarians and walk away from those that are our allies. It's Trump continuing to court the religious and throw them a bone every once in a while, and they just salivate and get really excited about all of this. We begin to see this weird mix of stuff. And what we're seeing in things like Project Blitz is an emboldened nature towards discrimination. It's an emboldened nature towards hatred. It's an emboldened nature towards being able to go back to segregating. And we're seeing this rise of anger and hatred and bigotry and misogyny happening again. Now, I will thank Trump. I will thank him for this. I will thank him for kind of metaphorically like lifting the rock of America's soul and letting us look to see what's underneath it. It's given us an opportunity to see how sick we are, how good we were for a long time at playing and acting like equality mattered in our country, like acting like people's lives really mattered in this country. Like we got pretty good at faking it. We got pretty good at acting like it. And then we see Trump rise to power, and we see all of this, like the rise of white nationalism, the rise of white supremacy, this rise again, where we're seeing this coming out of the woodworks. And to me, it's it's really, really made me scratch my head. And this comes from a person that grew up in the South. I grew up in the South having African-American friends and seeing little snippets of life through their eyes. And I'm not even trying to say I really even understand their plight, but being able to at least hear stories and be able to see snippets, as I walked and journeyed with people. I'm a person that grew up in the South and so hated like racism. I was like, I'm just so tired of this. And in my early 20s, my best way of handling this was I need to get the hell out of here. I just need to leave. And my wife and I moved across the country to like an area that was more progressive because we were like, finally, we can be away from a lot of this. And then we eventually find ourselves moving back here and beginning to see this like right around the times where the rise of Trump is happening. And just kind of being able to see like this new tsunami of just evil and hate and dirtiness and nastiness happen here. And all it tells me was it never went away. It just learned to hide. So the one thing I will thank Trump for is for exposing this. Because the problem, with all of this, we can't handle this. We can't deal with this. We can't deal with this kind of hate unless we can at least acknowledge that it's there. It's like acknowledging that we have, like America, acknowledging we have a problem is the first step. And even like with what I'm saying too, as we're looking through this, like I want to be able to say this to the church, like acknowledging we have a problem is the first step. And as we look through this, where I begin to see stuff like this, where we're establishing prayer caucuses and things of that nature, I begin to say like, wait, is this, okay, so if I'm seeing, like this is the end result of 2,000 years of Christianity? Is this really like when Jesus came and offered a different way to live, a different way to love, a different way to be compassionate, a different way to not see boundaries and to not discriminate against people? That Jesus, right? That Jesus that died for the way that he saw the world, the way he saw the world should be. That Jesus, right? And then we begin to see things like Project Blitz. We begin to see the conservative Christians and just how they just insanely continue to justify Trump over and over again. Is this the fruition? Is this the fruition? Like, is Jesus in heaven being like, yes, awesome, like yes? Because we talk about this in the Christian crazy. So we have all these nutter butters that are for the conservative side that are like, oh, this man is who God put in power. He is anointed by God and all this other stuff. And we do all these horrendous, nasty stuff in the name of God. The history of Christianity is also littered with people doing heinous stuff in the name of God. So I'm not necessarily saying this is all original. But when I begin to hear and read stuff like this, I begin to see how far Christianity has moved. Like Christianity has lost the plot. Like if Project Blitz is a way to somehow force God's kingdom again on the United States, even though, spoiler alert, we were never founded as a Christian nation. We really weren't. We were founded by what drives most of human history: power, greed, the desire for more, the desire to do it my way. That's what founded our country. That's like the heart of manifest destiny, is I can go out and get mine, and I don't care who I squash in the process. And we begin to see stuff like this with Project Blitz. And I haven't even gotten to like what's starting to happen now in Florida, which is scary, and maybe happening in your state as well, depending upon where you're listening through. But we begin to see this where we use wording like religious freedom. But when we say religious freedom, we only mean a certain religion needs freedom, and others are not afforded that freedom. For us to be able to look at the Constitution and be able to say stuff that we are, allowed to practice religious freedom without intervention from the state, that's whole separation of church and state. And we begin to see this meddling between church in the state. We begin to see meddling like this, We begin to see these things move forward, and you begin to see this sick and twisted version of Christianity that was never meant to be. It was never meant to be. And I know these churches will continue to sing songs and pray to Jesus and have American flags flying over their churches or in their sanctuaries next to the cross. But all of this is messed up. And all of this has really nothing to do with Jesus besides just using his name in the midst of it. This is really about personal preference and people wanting power to make the world comfortable and make the world in the mold that conservatives want it to be in. So when we talk about this, ideas of religious liberty, it isn't like you are free to practice what you want to do. You are free to practice what you want to do. You are free to practice what you want to do. See that to me, that's what sounds like religious liberty, right? As I will do my thing, you do your thing, and we're cool. We're cool. Like that's one of the beautiful things of why America, at least the idea of America, was cool, was that you do your thing, you do my thing. Like as long as we aren't hurting people, and we're being peaceful about this, like right on. But when we have things like this, when we begin to see things like this, we begin to realize this isn't about equality. This is about my way or the highway. This is about controlling people. This is about like forcing your values down someone else's throat, or you making laws based on your values that take away the options and rights of other people. And to me, that's very sick. And to me, that's actually very anti-God if you want to really read the way the Bible moves through. God has, I don't know, this is one of these kind of theological themes of the idea of free will and free choice. And the idea that we are trying to create laws and rules that force people to do something. Now, if you look at the Old Testament, you have the Jews, you had the Ten Commandments. You get to Leviticus, you get a lot of other rules. But again, those were rules that were meant to govern people that said they were the people of God, that were following after God, right? They weren't meant to govern other people that didn't know the rules, the other people that had never heard the rules. No, it didn't work that way. It was meant to govern a group of people that said, we're the children of God. We're walking around as the children of God, right? This is kind of like our club, and these are like our club rules. Like these were not meant to be for everybody. Now, is there value in many of what the Bible lays out? Sure. Is there a lot of confusion in how to read and interpret a lot of the Bible? Absolutely as well too. But again, we're not talking about our tribe, our church, our club, and our own personal rules. No. We're trying to make our personal rules the rules of the land. We're trying to force our ideas and our agenda onto other people and take away their ability to be able to live with their own freedom and their own truth. And this gets really scary. And I know when we say this, like we've probably been we've been living in a scary time for a while. So this isn't like new. But when you begin to see stuff like this that I remember, I think when I mentioned this, it was a year or so ago on the show, and it was more just like a blip, and it was kind of, oh, this is a thing, this is kind of happening. But as you begin to see it get traction in small, quiet ways through state legislatures, you begin to say, oh, wait a second, I need to take a bit of a pause, because this is starting to get a little scary. Now, I've mentioned this like several times, so finally, Stuart, get to the point. Okay, tell me what's going on in Florida, Stuart. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what is moving forward in Florida. And this is an article that I'm pulling from the Miami New Times by Jerry Iannelli. That's called Florida Bible Study Bill as Part of the National Christian Right Legislative Plan. And he begins by kind of outlining like a little bit of a timeline of what's happening here in Florida. So in 2017, Florida lawmakers spent all this time to pass a bill forcing the state to display "In God We Trust" in public schools. Again, seems innocuous, just seems kind of annoying and a waste of time. But remember, playbook, start simple. That's the way this whole thing works. Project Blitz works. Okay, So that begins to happen. And we know that that was just the beginning of a pro-Christian legislative push in Florida. So state lawmakers, I'm going to go ahead and quote from their article here. So state lawmakers, namely Jacksonville State Representative Kim Daniels, a former exorcist and turned pro-Trump Democrat. I want to have that person at a party. And a former exorcist turned pro-Trump Democrat. Yes. Okay. So Kim Daniels, in 2018, attempted to pass a religious freedom bill that gave kids extra rights to pray at school. So again, we're back to, we need to get prayer back in schools. We got to do this, because how do you take prayer out of anywhere unless you're doing like corporate prayer where you're making everyone pray in a way that's honestly more like the reciting of statements more than it is actual prayer? Because that's one of the things that's always bugged me about prayer in church, where you have like a pastor or someone come up and recite this lofty prayer. That's not really prayer. You're really just kind of public speaking with your eyes closed. You're reading a speech with your eyes closed and somehow hoping God's going to listen to this. So yes. So apparently Florida, yes, this last year they were attempting to pass a religious freedom bill that gave kids extra rights to pray in school. I'm just going to keep moving on. Yes. So far this year, remember, former exorcist turned pro-Trump Democrat. I just love that. That needs to be on business cards. So yes, so Daniels and 6 co-sponsors are pushing this bill, HB 195. And it's another odd measure that would force public schools to offer Bible study electives in schools. Now, so let's just go ahead and hop back into the article. But secular groups are crying foul. And as it turns out, all the aforementioned bills are part of, what are they part of? They're part of Project Blitz. So yes. Later in the article, they say this. Earlier this week, the nonprofit Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, a religious liberty watchdog group, sent Florida houses pre-K through 12 quality subcommittee an open letter warning that this bill appears to be part of a national legislative push. What? Yes, all of this is part of their playbook, and we're talking about this, and we've seen this happening in other states and in other places where they're trying to push this eventually, because to Christians, at least conservative Christians, religious liberty looks like do what I want, not what whoever them outside of our tribe wants. Strip people outside of our tribe's rights and abilities to live in our country and to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to go after all of this. All of this kind of thing that should be very American. Yes. No. But we continue to see this happen again and again. And Florida is just one of those small examples where we're seeing all of this kind of get traction and move forward. And see, what's weird in Florida is that Florida, if you live in Florida, or if you somehow know a lot about Florida, or if you've read articles about Florida, Florida already allows schools to voluntarily offer secular Bible study electives in schools. It's already okay if schools want to offer that. But what this bill is doing, it's going to make offering these biblical electives mandatory. It's going to become mandatory that these are on there. And what they're really trying to push for, the bill is actually calling for 3 specific classes to be in all schools. I'm assuming these are high schools. 3 specific classes that are going to be required if this passes. They would be 1 on the Bible and 2 separate classes on the Old and New Testament, which is... let's have 1 on the Bible, and then let's have 1 on the Bible, and another 1 on the Bible. But you're beginning to see this, is that they are requiring a specific religious text to be offered, not mandatorily offered, but that it will be on the books mandatorily in these schools. And if parents or kids want to be able to take them, they have to be there. But the problem with this is they're not offering this for other religions. And again, you're hearing this from a guy who follows Jesus, a guy who thinks Jesus is the real deal, a guy who believes in the things that Jesus said in the Bible, a guy who has spent his life and career, me, if you're not catching on what I'm saying, working in ministry, being frustrated with ministry, being frustrated with Christianity, but still continuing to push forward because he feels like Christianity is missing its mark. Yeah, this guy that does think that there is juice in Christianity that should matter. Yeah, this snarky guy says this is wrong. And things like this moving forward are wrong. And why do I say this? And there's a bunch of other stuff that we could continue to unpack about how we've mentioned earlier about how this is just really this whole Project Blitz thing moves Christians so far away from the plot of Christianity, so far beyond the mission and the vision of Jesus when we begin to talk about things. And I wanted to end reading a lot from an article by Shane Phipps. And this was published a couple days ago on his Patheos website entitled, "What If We Were a Red Letter Church?" And for those that don't understand like what red letter means, generally is in certain Bibles that you buy, certain publishers will have the red letters, so like literally the text that Jesus speaks, or the times that Jesus speaks are in red letters. If that makes sense. So you have like normal text that's black, and then you have the text where like it's quoting Jesus directly. That's red. That's kind of how being a red letter Christian means. Is that essentially being a red letter Christian means I really want to just do what Jesus told me to do. I want to follow the teachings of Jesus. I really just think that these things matter. I feel like these things really matter. And coming from a person that why this matters is because I feel like that a lot of times, especially within conservative Christianity, they get this wrong. I grew up and spent many years in that world, where what tends to happen is the red letters. Now, first of all, here's what I'm going to tell you happens in most conservative Christian churches, because I've been in and around a lot of them. Not everyone, but just generally. I'm speaking in generalities here. But the idea of the red letters of Jesus end up being downplayed. Now, if you ask anyone from these conservative churches, they will tell you that is not true. And this isn't something that's necessarily stated or said that we want to like somehow downplay the words of Jesus and play up the teachings where somehow God is more of an a-hole, or when Paul is an a-hole in the New Testament. So we kind of do this weird thing to where like we elevate the like angry God, or we elevate the angry Paul, and we kind of like move Jesus down. We knock Jesus down a few notches because he speaks in many ways that one, are hard for us to walk out. Two, they're very compassionate and graceful and loving, and require a lot of us to not be judgy. Which again, people from the conservative ilk, being judgy, that's akin to godliness, right? You know, you've heard the statement, cleanliness is near godliness. This is like, judginess is essentially godliness in the conservative world. And what begins to happen when you hear this kind of stuff preached on a regular basis. I remember being part of a conservative church, not necessarily by choice, but less by circumstance. And I remember sitting in the pews of this place and kind of being frustrated. And this isn't like a single Sunday. No, we did this over years of being in a place like this, being able to sit and listen through this. And I would get more and more frustrated. And in the time that I was attending this church, and let me think, how many? At least 5 years. Now, the why of it, that's a whole nother question. But kind of sitting there and listening to what was preached here, I will tell you, by and large, and I'm not saying exclusively, but the few times that they would actually let me get up and preach, those were some of the few times you ever actually heard the words of Jesus preached in this church. Now, we want to talk about God's anger, God's wrath, about like Old Testament, about Leviticus, about how all these other people are evil and bad, or we can get to Paul, where Paul seems to be condemning this group or this group or this group. But again, the words of Jesus, they were devalued, whereas the angriness of God or Paul was raised up. And in this article we're talking about, I know I'm on a total aside here, and I'm going to rope it back in, by Shane Phipps. I loved what he was saying is, what if the church in America began to look more like the red letters of Jesus? And he said this. He said, here's what I think would happen. that the church would be too busy spreading love and serving others to worry too much about politics. They would immediately begin to shed their reputations as judgmental, divisive hypocrites. And they might begin to attract the marginalized of society rather than repel them. Jesus was a magnet for the marginalized of his time, much to the chagrin of the church leaders who chastised him. And when you begin to see this, and I love how he kind of goes through this, and he talks through in this article, and I would go ahead and highly recommend reading this if you want to look this up, but he goes through a lot of the divisive issues of our time, like abortion or social justice or LGBTQ rights, and begins to put these through the lens of Jesus and the lens of how the church should be holding this and how the church should be handling this, right? Let me give you some examples. So a red letter church wouldn't have to endorse abortions. They just have to stop using it as a political issue to divide. People wouldn't have to feel strapped to any political party or platform over this issue. Rather, they could reach out with love to the women who find themselves with an unwanted pregnancy. Instead of condemning places like Planned Parenthood, churches could reach out and form partnerships with them. They could offer counseling for the women, where they could connect them with resources in the community to make other paths and options more palatable and easy to find. And if after all that, the women still ended up choosing to have an abortion, then they could still love her and welcome her and join her into the congregation of equally struggling sinners. You see, I don't have to actually agree with the thrust of the entire article, what they're getting here, but because I love really just the heart of what he's saying here, is that if Christianity was really obsessed, if it was really obsessed with walking out the ways of Jesus, of walking out the ethics of Jesus, of walking out the teachings of Jesus and the heart and compassion of Jesus, the church would be, and Christians would be too consumed with doing that work to even give two craps about what's going on in the political sphere. They'd be too busy investing in people in the communities to care about all of this. So why does the church not care about the teachings of Jesus, and why do they care about politics so much? It's because the church isn't the church. The church is a business. And businesses need people and money and power. And like you hear me say this over and again on this show way too often, church in America doesn't know who it is. It doesn't know what it's about. It doesn't know what success is. It doesn't know what the heart of Christ is anymore. It just cares about itself. And a selfish church is no church at all. A power-hungry church is no church at all. A church that has forgotten Jesus is no Christian church at all. So the problem is we've got a bunch of powerful posers that are out there, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating. But what I want to leave you, my dear listeners, with is a call to be able to return to those teachings of Jesus, to return to love and grace and compassion, to return to self-sacrifice and doing the greater good, not because it proves a point, because it's the right thing to do. And I think the church has forgotten about what the right thing to do is anymore. It's not about buildings. It's not about services. It's not about political favor or power. It's about helping those who need help. It's about giving to those in need. That, my friends, is what Christianity is supposed to be about. And as we speak about this, it should become something that is very stark in our heads of how far off the path we have gone. Is it fixable? Sure it is. And it starts with you. Living it out on a daily basis. Being good news to those around you. Being a help to those who need help. An ear to those who need someone to listen. Or being someone who offers a hand to those who are in need. That's what kind of projects we should be about. I wish I wish Christianity had a Project Blitz that was all about going and loving neighbors and loving people in the community and helping people and doing it in a self-sacrificial manner without asking you to believe how I believe or do as I do, but doing it just because it's the right thing to do as a human. Someday, maybe. But as we end this broadcast, just a reminder that you can catch us on podcasts at www.snarkyfaith.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you have questions, comments, and anything of the above, or that kind of fits in that realm, feel free. Email me. I answer our emails, and I love them. The good, the bad, and the ugly that I get in the email. Questions at snarkyfaith.com. That's all the time I've got this hour. So let me send you out into this world with immense amounts of grace and peace and snark. Go out and make a difference. I'll catch you again next week. I'm out of here.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.